Robert, thank you so much for coming on the show. You've been in the space for a long time. I know we have a couple mutual friends, Craig Rosenberg, of course, who now you're having an opportunity to work with again at scale, and just really being able to see the evolution of our industry, and just derive all this insight and sharing it with us is we're really like pretty fortunate and appreciative of your time.
Thank you for having me, Jorge, and I look forward to speaking with you. I love what you guys are doing at Asset Mule, and I think the whole conversation we're going to have today is exciting.
Awesome. Well, why don't you just take a quick second to maybe introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about, how you got into this space and really have emerged as an expert in the category.
Yeah, I started off in financial and publishing industries, and then I transitioned over to high tech, where I've worked in sales management, sales enablement, product management, and customer success functions. I've trained over 3,500 sellers globally. And as a sales and go-to-market consultant advisor, I've consulted with over 50 organizations in the last 7 years. And I've been fortunate to have a lot of good opportunities. I've been both an operator, a consultant, and a go-to-market advisor. And my work background includes working for Fortune 100 companies such as HP and IBM, as well as rocket growth startups like LinkedIn and Compass. And as you alluded to, currently I work as an independent sales consultant, helping founders, sales, and marketing leaders optimize their revenue engines, as well as working as a go-to-market advisor with Craig Rosenberg for Scale Venture Partners.
Yeah. Again, just love Craig. I remember a couple of times. I think this was during the midst of me shutting down my a startup that I did a couple of years ago. I would say it was like my last startup before the current one, and I remember calling Craig up, and he, just gave me a lot of really good life advice, and he was very empathetic and compassionate. Once you've been in the game for a while, certainly as long as Craig has been, you've seen the movie a bunch of times. And so I remember that conversation. I wasn't in my best spirits because it's not a great experience to have to shut a company down. And particularly when you've, been pursuing it for such a long time. I saw a post today from, gosh, who was it? It was the guy who, Ryan, I forgot his last name. He's the founder of Product Hunt. And he was talking about how the second time founder kind of experience is much more difficult, and it kind of resonated with me because I think he wasn't necessarily saying number two, but he was saying every venture or experience after that first one is quite difficult for a variety of reasons. And I said to myself, boy, that really resonates. And so, just again, shout out to Craig for being there. And he's a really good friend. I had a question, just given you've seen so many trends over the, last decade or so, how have you seen specifically sales tech evolve over the last decade? Anything that really stands out, and where do you see it moving forward?
Yeah. Do we have 2 hours?
I have to pick up my son, but we could.
First, just a general comment. It's been mind-boggling if you consider that most components of today's sales tech stack were just born or didn't exist 10 years ago. And consider some of the following things. Sales engagement platforms were just born. Outreach wasn't founded until 2011. Enterprise content management tools like HighSpot were just founded in 2012. Sales intelligence tools were just coming on the scene, like LinkedIn Sales Navigator in 2012, and Gong.io and the whole concept of call recordings didn't even exist. So there's a lot of things, but I'll just point out a couple of observations in terms of what stands out to me. One, the proliferation of the sales tech stack for sales development, or the SDR function, with SalesLoft, Outreach, Groove, and the amount of automation that's happened there, from messaging to scheduling of cadences. And in some ways, the SDR function has really been a proxy or the birthplace for a lot of technology advances. Second, the proliferation of tools. First, I didn't mention the CRM because that has been there for a long time. But what's happened has been a proliferation of tools to help with distinct sales stages, like the demo. We've seen demo automation tools to scale the delivery of demos over the last 5 to 10 years, as well as a proliferation of tools to help with sales plays within sales stages or cross sales stages, such as, there's now technology and companies dedicated to rapidly developing and tracking something as specific as mutual success plan.
Yep.
And then the proliferation of technology across different channels. Video comes to mind. I remember piloting a video outreach solution in 2012 when I was at LinkedIn, and that continues to take off. The last thing that comes to mind is the boom in the ability to track and analyze, from listening to call recordings through platforms like Gong.io and Chorus AI to content management systems that allow you to see who's consuming what for how long and to what effect, to tools like LinkedIn Sales Navigator that allow you to track relationships across an organization. So it's not just that they're enabling certain things, it's that we've really taken a quantum leap in the ability to track and analyze what's happening through that technology. And the last thing I'll say is that it's ironic because I remember a conversation that I had with the VP of Symantec's, the global VP of Symantec's sales operations before 2015 when I was a part of the early LinkedIn sales solutions team. And he said, today we have over 100 different sales tools in our global sales organization. We're looking to consolidate. So please explain to me how adding yet another tool, your tool, is going to make our organization more efficient and grow revenue. Yet I'd argue in one case that there's even more tools and complexity that have been added since then.
That's one of the things that, we hear constantly in the space, right? Especially the last 2 years, while there's been so much consolidation of tools and, the macro environment. And I think that's one thing that I'm glad you pointed out that sellers have to really be able to address, right? We've had a bloated stack, and now it's how do you become an absolute must-have, right? And I mean, if you look at you mentioned the CRM, right? Like, who's going to rip out their CRM, right? It's going to be very difficult. Who's going to rip out data? You need data. So, you have those systems, I think, that continue to sort of persist, and they've been making it through this, down market that we've been experiencing. But I think that salespeople out there and organizations, you have to have a really good narrative for that. And not only just the narrative from a net new selling perspective, but, if you want recurring revenue, if you want those, retention sort of metrics to be there, and that's the lifeblood of this space. You really need to figure that out. So I'm really glad that you pointed that out. Any tips that you've given sort of sellers around having a better story, and how does that actually impact the product as well, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of tips, and I'd say one, it's got to be personalized and relevant. As consumers and as B2B buyers, we've all experienced a plethora of generic approaches that don't add value. And as I often say, executives don't want to be asked what's keeping them up at night. They want to be told what should be keeping them up at night. So it needs to be personalized. You need to come with a perspective, and you need to differentiate, not in terms of how you're the best, the only, but rather how you're different, how you approach the problem differently, how you think about the problem. And you'll hear me say this probably a couple of times today, even though we're talking right now about technology, which is love the problem, not the solution. And I wanted to go back because you asked, where do I see the sales tech stack moving forward? And you beat me to the punch on number one, which is in the short term, I think there's going to be a big purge of nice to have from the tech stack. In today's economic environment where CFOs are scrutinizing a lot of things, if you're not must to have, you don't integrate within the current workflow and integrate with the big systems like the CRM, you're not going to be part of the 2024 budget. Two, I see a lot of consolidation happening with the sales enablement, sales intelligence, and content capabilities. And I think they'll ultimately merge into one platform or fewer platforms. I remember a CEO many years ago saying to me, I'd say it's about 5 or 6 years ago, when I was asking about all those different categories, like, I see it coming down to two companies that are really going to battle it out. I won't name them here, so I don't play favorites. And so far, that's what I've seen happen. I think the sales engagement apps like Outreach, SalesLoft, Groove are going to continue scaling across the entire sales organization, not just SDRs. And I know we're going to get into AI. I'll make 3 comments. Everybody's favorite buzzword. I'm trying not to use the word. But I think the other things we're going to see is we're going to see a big automation of personalization. And that may sound like an oxymoron. What I mean by that is if I've been an SDR or an AE over the last several years, I spent a lot of time doing research, trying to figure out how to personalize my message. And we'll get to the point where a lot of that is created. You've just got to fill in some of the blanks to personalize it. And you're just doing the last 10% to get into the end zone. Not the 50% that we used to do.
Awesome. Well, now that you've been working with scale, and you've been seeing a bunch of, really great deals come through the desk, any sort of like spaces that you're most excited about?
I'll mention a couple of things that stand out to me. One, I continue to be excited about the automation and the sales development space, since we've been talking about that. You have companies like Reggie AI that are doing some very transformative things in terms of automating cadences and learning on the fly. I think as part of that, the SDR role over time is going to transform to more of a program management role. To specific technologies, this isn't part of the sales tech stack, but I'm excited about robotics. And it's the question of the cost of a robot versus the cost of a human. And as we get into things that are very manual, time intensive, or cause safety issues, I think there's going to be a lot of room for robotics, not necessarily replace humans, but to help them be safer, to get more done. And I think of a robotics company that I was working with 2 weeks ago down in Texas, and they're automating the whole space of depalletization. And their solution leverages robots, but also leverages the human in the process. The other thing is synthetic data, because it enables using lots of simulated real-world data without the concerns of data privacy and security. And I'll give you an example. The specific area I think about in the sales space is demos. And we've had demo automation tools that really help scale demos. And I think that's going to start to move with synthetic data to live product demos in a safe sandbox environment that's going to allow buyers to get much deeper into the product without an SE demo or an AE demo. So it's going to save a lot of time and hopefully accelerate sales processes for those companies that see it as a competitive advantage. The last thing that I'm going to throw out there is a sort of hodgepodge all over the place is I'm excited about the potential for sales technology that enables what I call nearbound, which is a motion that leverages alliances and partners to co-sell leverages intel, insights, and introductions to better leverage existing relationships and trust versus cold outreach and doing hunting that's starting from scratch.
There are tools like formerly CoSell, now, it's High Five. I know they've been doing some really cool things, making it easy to get introductions. And then, of course, Crossbeam has been around for a couple of years now. Really cool tool.
Yeah, Crossbeam, Reveal, there's a few. So I'm really excited to see how those develop. LinkedIn really transformed relationship selling at an individual level. I think the Crossbeams, Reveals, and whatever other technology enables is really going to transform relationships on an account level.
Awesome. Well, speaking of AI, right, what do you think is going to be the real impact of AI on sales organizations and then, of course, our motions?
Yeah. I'll start with a comment or two about everybody's favorite topic, AI. And I think the short answer is the biggest impact to me is going to be in automating inefficient sales tasks and providing much deeper pattern recognition and insights, perhaps for sales leaders first and then sellers. And the vision of AI is leveraging computers and machines to mimic problem solving and decision-making capabilities of the human mind, significantly accelerating pattern recognition, decision-making, and judgment. And, Main Street's really been focused on the ethical dimensions and fear behind replacing human decision-making and judgment. However, I don't see that as the focus of most current high-tech entrepreneurs. So I think in the business world, the two biggest benefits today and where people should look for solutions coming out that are AI enabled to solve business problems are pattern recognition and efficiency. Because through artificial intelligence, we can now process huge amounts of data that most humans cannot much more quickly. And I'll give you one or two specific examples. Think of the immense wealth of data we have from all the call recordings out there, which I don't think is really being leveraged. I think a lot of companies have Gong or Course AI, and they still haven't really mined it effectively. Imagine now that you could use a tool and in 10 minutes get a report as to what personas you're selling to at what stage of the sales cycle. Because we always say you need to call higher. Now we get much more specific information. Here are all the personas, over 3,000 calls in our company of who we're typically talking to, what percentage of the time at what stage, so we can make adjustments. Think about it from a product management sales enablement perspective. We can find out now by analyzing 3 calls in a matter of 30 minutes or less, what are the top 5 objections? What were successful ways to deal with them? So those are specific examples of what I mean about pattern recognition. And the last general comment on AI, I would say, is AI is not going to replace humans, in my opinion. What it's going to replace is people that don't understand AI and how to leverage it with humans that do. So, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't mind if they do. I can sit on the beach and let my AI pay my bills, right? Well, if you look at this current down market, how does this compare? Everyone's talking about it, right? We're talking about AI. We're talking about cut budgets and the market, macro environment over the last 2 years or so. How does this actually compare to markets that you've seen in the past? I've asked a couple of folks who have seen a couple of these cycles in the past, and they've had kind of their opinion. What would you say is kind of your opinion, and what advice would you give founders and leaders around getting through it?
Yeah. So first on my background, to date myself, I went through Black Friday in 1987. I worked for Fidelity Investments. At that time, it was the greatest one-day drop in the stock market from the Great Depression. I was in Silicon Valley and lived through the dot-com bubble burst of 2000, made it through the financial meltdown of 2008 and how that slowed down the economy, made it through the pandemic and recent headwinds, No, before you ask, I was not around during the Great Depression. So on a general level, I see today as less of one dramatic event and more a culmination of events, including, the housing bubble, the pandemic, and a seemingly overnight shift from emphasizing growth at all costs to profitability and efficient, scalable growth. How should founders, how do founders get through it? What they should be thinking about? One, I'm going to repeat it again, love the problem, not the solution. Understanding your customers and ensuring product market fit is going to be critical because, as we discussed, if it's not must have, they won't keep investing. Two, my advice to a lot of companies and founders is revisit and truly understand your ideal customer profile, or ICP. And that means having, particularly in this environment, ruthless focus of finite sales and marketing resources, outbound resources, and focusing on those accounts with the highest likelihood to buy, with the least amount of friction, that will provide the greatest amount of long-term value, or put another way, the least amount of churn. As part of that, I think companies should be looking at, and in several cases, having greater emphasis on investing in current customer expansion and customer marketing. The other thing I'll say is that I think this reiterates the importance of great hiring practices. Woody Allen said 90% of life is showing up. Well, 90% of success in this environment is hiring and putting the right people in the right place. And the last thing that I'm encouraging folks to think about is revisit the modern channel. Think of partner-driven sales and marketplaces as a core part of your strategy, not an afterthought to bring in a little more revenue that you can sort of, flirt with and get in and out of different partnerships. And bonus, pay attention to culture, and that involves a whole load of additional things.
But now you mentioned outbound. There's been a lot of talk about outbound not being what it used to be. I think I know the answer or what you're going to say here, but what would you say is the state of outbound? I mean, it's not dead, right? Like, it's definitely different, but what would you say to someone who says it's dead? And then just speaking around like pipeline growth, what should organizations be doing today, given all sort of the variables they have to deal with around efficiently growing pipeline?
I don't think outbound is dead. I think the way we've been doing it is starting to die, or stated more professionally, less dramatically, is much less effective and showing much less of a return. All the data at a consumer level from companies like McKinsey and on a B2B level shows that people want a much more personalized approach, and that they haven't been getting it. So I think the outbound motion is going to have to get much more targeted, fire bullets, not cannonballs, much more personalized and much more relevant, where you come with a perspective and are adding some value in that initial outreach. So from that perspective, it's not dead to me. It's just going to change. And as I mentioned, I think in some cases, with all the technology that's coming out, in some cases, I'll argue it's the SDR function is really going to pivot to more of a program manager role.
Got it. Cool. Well, Robert, thank you so much for being on the show. Very much appreciate you sharing your wisdom. For the folks out there, you've heard it from one of the most insightful folks in the Valley. I know we met through a couple really good friends, and of course Topo and all. Shout out to Scott and that crew there. If folks wanted to, let's say, get in contact with you, or maybe learn more about the services you provide, or maybe just follow your content, what are the best URLs or channels to reach you?
Best channel is LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile, Robert Koehler. It's Koehler. You'll see me listed there as a go-to-market advisor for Scale Venture Partners. And I'd say that's the best way to reach me today, to keep it simple.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for being on the show, and have a great day.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.